The rain poured down in heavy sheets, drumming against the tin roof of a small worn-out house at the edge of the town. Inside, dim candlelight flickered, casting shadows on the cracked walls. The smell of herbal medicine filled the air, blending with the dampness of the evening. Maria sat by the bedside of her son, Daniel, her fingers gently running through his hair. His breathing was shallow, his body frail. She had spent the last 20 years caring for him, sacrificing everything to keep him alive. Maria had once dreamed of a different life. She had imagined a home filled with laughter, a warm kitchen where she would cook meals for a happy family, and a husband by her side to share the burden. But life had taken a cruel turn. Her husband passed away suddenly in an accident, leaving her alone with a sick child and a mountain of struggles. The world did not pause for her grief. Bills piled up, food became scarce, and every day felt like a battle against time. She worked tirelessly, taking on any job she could find, washing clothes for neighbors, scrubbing floors in rich homes, sewing torn garments for a few coins. Every penny she earned went to Daniel's medicines, doctor visits, and whatever food she could afford. Sleep was a luxury she could not afford, and rest was a word she had long forgotten. But Maria never complained. She never once thought of giving up. Daniel was her life, and as long as she had breath in her body, she would fight for him. That day, however, something felt different. Maria had finished her shift earlier than usual. Her boss at the cleaning job had unexpectedly told her she could leave after half a day. It was rare, almost unheard of, but Maria was grateful. She hurried home, eager to check on Daniel, to sit with him longer, maybe even tell him a story, like she used to when he was little. As she reached the house, she noticed the front door was slightly open. A strange unease settled in her chest. She was sure she had locked it before leaving. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside, her eyes darting around the dimly lit room. The wooden chair by the table was toppled over, and there was a faint sound, like a whisper, or perhaps just the wind slipping through the cracks in the walls. She called out softly, "Daniel!" No answer. Her pulse quickened. She moved towards his small bedroom, her hands trembling as she pushed the door open. The bed was empty. The blanket lay crumpled, the pillow pushed aside. Maria's breath hitched in her throat. Daniel was too weak to walk on his own. He could barely sit up without her help. Panic clawed at her chest. Where was he? Had someone taken him? Or had he somehow managed to get up and leave? But how? Why? Her mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Then, just as she was about to step back, she noticed something on the floor, a small piece of paper, folded neatly. She picked it up, her fingers shaking as she unfolded it, and as she read the words written in uneven, shaky handwriting, her, world tilted on its axis. What she saw on that paper changed everything. Maria's hands trembled as she gripped the piece of paper tighter, her eyes scanning over the words again and again. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Daniel's. But how? He was too weak to even hold a spoon, let alone write a note. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she read the message once more. "Mama, don't worry. I had to go." Her knees nearly buckled beneath her. Go? Go where? Daniel could barely stand on his own, let alone leave the house. A surge of panic swept through her, making her heart hammer against her ribs. Frantically, she rushed through the small house, checking every corner as if he might be hiding somewhere, as if this was all some cruel misunderstanding. But the silence that filled the space was deafening. She ran outside, her bare feet hitting the cold, wet ground. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the streets were empty. A few neighbors stood under their porches, watching the storm pass. Maria's voice cracked as she called out, "Did anyone see Daniel?" An elderly woman from the house across the street frowned and shook her head. A young boy playing with a broken toy car pointed toward the dirt road leading out of the neighborhood. "I saw a man," he mumbled. "He was carrying someone on his back." Maria felt her stomach drop. "What man? Who was he?" The boy shrugged, uninterested, and went back to his toy. Maria turned in circles, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Was it someone she knew, a kind stranger, or was her son in danger? The thought made her dizzy. Tears blurred her vision as she rushed back inside, searching for any clue, anything at all. And then, just as she was about to give up, she noticed something near Daniel's pillow. A small bundle of crumpled bills. Not much, but more than she had left that morning. Someone had placed them there on purpose. Her breathing grew unsteady. Had Daniel left willingly? Or had someone taken him but tried to ease her worry with this money? It didn't make sense. None of it did. She sat on the bed, clutching the note against her chest. Memories flooded her mind. Years of caring for Daniel, of holding him through sleepless nights when his fever wouldn't break, of feeding him spoonfuls of soup while whispering stories about a future where he would be strong and free. And now he was gone. Sudden knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. She ran to open it, hoping, praying that it was Daniel, but instead, she found herself staring at a man she barely recognized. He was tall, his clothes slightly damp from the rain, his face shadowed under the dim light. He hesitated before speaking. "You're Maria?" She swallowed hard. "Who are you?" The man exhaled deeply and glanced down at his hands. I know where your son is." Maria felt the world tilt. "Where? Tell me," she begged, grabbing his arm. "Is he safe? Who took him?" The man hesitated, his eyes filled with something Maria couldn't quite place. Pity, guilt, maybe both. "He's with his father," he finally said. Maria's breath caught in her throat. The words didn't make sense. What are you talking about?" she whispered. "His father is dead." The man shook his head slowly. "No, he's not." Maria's world shattered in an instant. The pain of the past, the years of suffering, the loneliness, all of it came rushing back like a flood. Her husband, the man she had mourned for 2 decades, was alive. And now, after all these years, he had taken Daniel. The room spun around her. Her fingers gripped the doorframe to steady
herself.
She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but her voice wouldn't come. The man sighed. "He's been looking for you both, for years, but he couldn't come back. Not until now." Maria shook her head violently. No, this is a lie. He left us. He died. I buried him in my heart. I'm sorry," the man said softly, "but I promise you, Daniel is safe, and his father wants to explain everything." Maria's breath hitched. She didn't know whether to cry, to collapse, or to run out into the night searching for her son. Nothing made sense. And yet, deep in her heart, an old wound reopened. A wound she had forced herself to forget. What had really happened all those years ago, and more importantly, could she face the truth now? Maria's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear anything else. The man's words echoed in her mind, words she couldn't accept, yet couldn't ignore. Her husband was alive. He had taken Daniel. And now, after all these years, he wanted to explain. She didn't waste another second. "Where is he?" she demanded, her voice unsteady but firm. The man hesitated. "It's not far," he finally said. "I'll take you." Maria didn't stop to think. She grabbed her shawl and stepped out, into the night, following him through the narrow streets, her breath quick and uneven. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a thick, cold mist. Her mind raced with questions, but none of them mattered more than one. Was Daniel okay? After what felt like an eternity, they stopped outside a small rundown house on the outskirts of town. The door was slightly open, a faint glow spilling onto the muddy ground. Maria didn't wait for an invitation. She rushed inside, her eyes darting wildly, and then she saw him. Daniel lay on a cot, wrapped in a thick blanket. His face was pale, but his eyes, those tired, beautiful eyes, looked up at her with something she hadn't seen in years. Peace, relief. Tears filled her vision as she fell to her knees beside him. "Daniel," she breathed, touching his face gently, as if making sure he was real. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" Daniel gave her a weak smile. "I'm fine, Mama," he whispered. "I came here because I had to." Maria's heart clenched. Before she could ask what he meant, she felt a presence in the room. Slowly, she turned. A man stood in the corner, his face half hidden in shadow. But even after 20 years, Maria recognized him instantly. The man she had loved, the man she had mourned, the man she had hated. Her breath caught. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." He stepped forward, his eyes filled with regret, with pain. "Maria!" His voice cracked. "It's me." Everything inside her screamed that this was impossible, but the truth stood right in front of her. Alive, older, different yet the same. Why? The words slipped from her lips like a broken plea. "Why did you let me believe you were dead?" He swallowed hard. "I never wanted to leave," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I swear to you, Maria, I fought to stay, but I was taken, forced into something I couldn't escape. And when I finally could, I was too late. You were gone. I searched for you both, but I had nothing, no name, no home to come back to." His hands shook. "I lost everything." Maria's body trembled. The anger, the sorrow, the years of loneliness, all of it crashed over her at once. "And now you think you can just come back?" she choked out. "After I spent 20 years fighting for our son alone? After I buried you in my heart? I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he whispered. "But Daniel, he found me. He wanted to know the truth." Maria turned back to her son. He was watching them, his eyes filled with understanding beyond his years. "Mama," he said, softly. "I needed to see him. I needed to know who he was." Tears spilled down Maria's cheeks. Her entire world had revolved around protecting Daniel, keeping him safe. But she had never considered what he might need, what he might feel about the past he never got to know. Her husband stepped closer, his voice low. "I don't expect anything from you, Maria. I only wanted to see you both one last time, to know that you're safe." His eyes flickered toward Daniel. "To know that he has a chance to live." Maria frowned. "What do you mean?" A pained look crossed his face. "I found a doctor," he said quietly. "Someone who can help Daniel. A specialist. I saved every cent I could, but it's not enough. I needed to find you." Maria stared at him, her heart pounding. For years she had begged the heavens for a miracle. Had it finally come? She looked at Daniel, searching his face for an answer. "Do you want this?" she asked. A tear slipped down his cheek as he nodded. "I want to try, Mama." Maria closed her eyes, overwhelmed. She had spent her whole life running from the past, shielding herself from pain. But now, for the first time, she saw that holding on to the past had also kept her from the future. She took a slow breath and turned back to the man she once loved. "Then we do it together," she said. His eyes widened, searching hers. "You mean?" "I mean that. I don't know how to forgive you," she admitted. "But I know I can't do this alone anymore." She took Daniel's hand in hers, then reached out, hesitant, trembling, and took her husband's as well. For the first time in 20 years, Maria felt something shift inside her. The past had been cruel, but the future was still unwritten, and for Daniel, for all of them, she was willing to try.